All right. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. We are on page 269 in the Art Scroll for those who are following us along. And today's shir should be Le'ilu Nishmas, our dear friend Menachem ben Yisrael Yaakov, as well as my dear and beautiful aunt Rivka Bas Gavriel Tzvi, and the Refuah Shalema Meshalem ben Sarah Rachel, as well as the Refuah Shalema Miriam Bas Sarah. All right. So yesterday we started Perek Zayin, the 7th chapter, and this which focuses on, till now we spoke about all the different tools that we're going to carry around with us every single day in our toolbox, and that's going to help us learn bitachon, learn what it means, all those different scenarios and stuff like that. Now Perek Zayin focuses on the pitfalls, the things that we have to try to avoid in our lives to make sure that we stay on that path of bitachon. Because as we know, sometimes we're going to get something that's going to deter us, and we're going to be like, oh, forget everything I just learned the last year. Like, I can't anymore. And so those things are going to come about. And sometimes when we know that something is there just to deter us, it makes us a little bit stronger in understanding that I just have to work through this aspect and get over it. And so there was the initial three aspects of this concept of trying to stay away from negativity and so that we don't fall into these pitfalls. And so today we talk about the third specific factor. And it goes like this. Umehem. And yet another obstacle to bitachon is nitoisai el hasibois hakroivos asher hu roya oisan. A person's tendency is to focus on the most direct cause of his benefit or harm, which he sees, and to attach value to those causes and forget that Hashem is the true cause. He's going to give an example, but I've said this to so many people over time. When we talk about a problem that we have, every person has obstacles in their life, people have issues in their life, and people say, I only have one problem. And the one problem they will name is going to be the biggest problem they face in front of them. It's the closest one they have to heart. So for instance, if somebody is struggling with health, and they say, if only I get my health back, I would have the perfect life. And what happens is, Baruch Hashem, a couple of weeks later, a couple of months later, they get their health back, and then they realize there are other obstacles in their life. They have financial hurdles, they have relationship hurdles. There's all kinds of different things that we have. And so, Rav Av gives an example over here. He says, for example, if one's business generates a healthy profit, he tends to believe that this particular business or his skillful management of this said company brought about that gain. Likewise, if one receives a gift from his friend, he feels that this friend's goodwill is what brought him this benefit. If on the other hand, one suffers a loss, he blames it on a failure of his business model. He says, oh, this concept, that concept, I did this wrong. And if he endures an injury, he tends to blame it on the negligence of the one who caused it. In each case, he looks at the immediate cause and attributes that result to that cause, because it is the one he sees in front of him. The concept is very, very simple. When we gain something or lose something, whether it be financial or physical or emotional, we look at what is the direct cause. Like, I'm embarrassed. Why are you embarrassed? Because somebody just embarrassed me. So it's their fault. They're the reason it happened. But Rav Av is going to show you that is just what we spoke about, cause and effect a couple of months ago. That there's a whole long chain of cause and effect. In order for something for Hashem to carry out His decree, He makes a bunch of different things happen, right? We call it b'derech hateva. And so in order for those b'derech hateva things to happen, there's cause and effect. And so what we see immediately as what's closest to us, that what we believe is the cause to our success or our failures. And so now Rav Av goes further and he says like this: V'lo yeda ka'ilas kol asher tikravna meham olol. One who thinks this way does not realize that the closer the causes are in the chain of cause and effect to the one affected by them, timat yechaltam lahoyalam ola lahazikai, the less power they actually have to benefit or harm him. And let me explain it to you this way. If you go and collect money for tzedakah, and you go to a person and you ask them for money and they give it to you, you think the direct cause is that person. Rav Av is saying the opposite. The person, the cause that carries out the effect, so you getting that dollar from that person, is actually, that closest cause is actually has the least capabilities on the outcome of whether or not you should get that money or not. And he says further, conversely, the further the causes are from the effect, the more capable they are of benefiting or harming a significant person in an evident way. And he's going to explain it with an example. So just to understand this concept, I just want to give it to you high level, then we'll go into the example so you can understand it a little better. If you have something that is close to your effect, so in instance, a collecting tzedakah, you go to a person, they give you that dollar, you say, oh, that person gave me the dollar. Well, Rav Av was saying that this person giving the dollar is not the reason you receive the dollar. The reason you receive the dollar is because we spoke about the cause and effect, which is Hashem's decree. The actual reason you got the dollar is all the way up that chain of cause and effect to Hashem. Hashem said, I want to give this person a dollar. Now, how that happened was through a series of cause and effects. And so he brings, to illustrate this principle, Rav Av brings an example. He says there's Kamoy HaMelech, there's a king, a Melech Basav Adam, a king, Kishahu Roitze La'anois Echad Me'avadav. He wants to punish one of his servants. So what does he do? Mitzava Mishneu Lasas. He commands his viceroy to make it happen. V'hamishne mitzava hasar, and the viceroy delegates an official. V'hasar mitzava hasoiter, and the official mandates an officer to see that the man is punished. V'hasoiter mitzava l'sardiyot, and the officer instructs an administrator. He's going through all the different levels of, the process of how this gets done. V'hasardiyot mitzava hanoikshim, and the administrator orders the enforcers to carry out the punishment. And the enforcers accomplish the act of punishment with the instruments prepared for this purpose. So he goes through a bunch of different levels of what happens. The king ordered something, and what happened? He had to ask this person, who had to take it to this person, who had to take it to the next level, had to take it to the House, to the Congress, to the Democrats, all those different things. Now, the one who has the least ability to ease or intensify the offender's pain, who has the least ability in order to change that outcome in the slightest bit, him hakelim. Those are the instruments used by the person who's carrying out the decree from the king, which came from his direct report, who came from his direct report, who came all the way up the chain of command till the king. Because they don't have no choice in the matter. The enforcers who wield those instruments, who are thus a step removed from the offender, have more ability than the instruments to ease and intensify his pain. So he's saying that every step that you go back towards the king, that person has more and more leverage to change the outcome, whether it's less or more of a punishment. Likewise, the administrator who's further removed has more ability than the enforcer, since he has authority to moderate the punishment. Until it gets all the way back up to the king, and the king who decreed this to happen, the king has the ability to change the outcome altogether. Since he can pardon this offender if he so wishes. He says, based on this example that I just made it very, very clear to you, we understand that the king made this happen, but it went through a whole bunch of different hands, and each person's hand that it goes to has less and less ability to change any part of that outcome. Is that whether specific causes have little or much power to help the person on receiving end, depends on their closeness to or distance from the recipient. The closer a cause is to the person, the less power it actually has. And the more distant the cause is from the person, the more power it has. For this example, in a human administration, we can take a lesson regarding Hashem administration to our affairs. And what he says, he compares it like this. V'haboire yis'ale asher hu taklis ha'ilos beroichak min ha'alalim ro liftoyach boi v'lismech alav. Thus, it is sensible to trust and rely upon Hashem, who is the ultimate cause in the chain of cause and effect, is the most remote from the recipients. Just like in the example of the Melech Bas of Adam, who is the most remote from the recipient, from the offender, and the king is the one who makes this decision, he should be trusted by every person, due to his all-powerful control over their benefit and harm. Just like in this example, the king has the ultimate command over whether or not what's going to happen, Hashem has this power over every living thing on this world. Kasha kedamnu min hadvarim. As we explained above, in chapter 2 and 3, we spoke about this. In order for a person to acquire bitachon, he first must bear in mind that focusing on the immediate cause of events is determined by bitachon. That we have to understand that Hashem is actually the ruler and carries out those things. We spoke about Bechira, we spoke about the cause and effect, that at the end of the day, even though we have Bechira and choice, but the concept of actually following through the physical act of getting it done, that's only up to Hashem. And so what he explains over here is very, very simple. He says, although it may seem that the person or the one that we're interacting with was the primary reason why something good or bad happened to him, this is not the truth. So the person that was closest to the cause and effect, so the immediate person that you got, let's say in the case of tzedakah, that you received that dollar from, that person or thing was just the end of a long chain of cause and effect. In fact, this person that you got the dollar from in this example was the weakest part of this cause and effect. Just as in the example of the king, the lower down the chain of command someone is, the less power he has. The higher up they are, the more power they have. Now in the example of the king and his intermediaries, all the way back down to the executioner of that decree, the higher up an official is, the more influence he has on the nature of the punishment. Such as how many times he should get, if they're going to punish him with, let's say, thrashes, how many times he should get thrashed and all that different stuff. If we would consider the example of this king and compare it exactly to Hashem, if we want to make it an exact comparison, we would make the conclusion that the intermediaries between Hashem and the person that's receiving this punishment also have some influence on what happens to this person, because in that example, what we said was they don't have as much power as the king because the decree has to be held out, but how much pain you should have, how hard, how many slashes, all that fun stuff. We talked about that. It says, but such a conclusion is you can't say when it comes to Hashem. We know from earlier in Shaar Habitachon, we learned again, we said that the Bechira is there, but the outcome is up to Hashem. That person will receive a blessing or a hardship exactly as decreed by Hashem alone, and no one can interfere with his will. So accordingly, here, they explain that although Hashem's decree is channeled through various forces, exactly the way he wants it to happen, none of the forces in creation has the power to affect his decree in any way. And all the intermediaries in between, the people who make it happen, the executioners, all those different officers, used to strike the king's subject, not the king's officers who are granted some choice in this matter. Indeed, whatever authority the officers have is by the king's grace, and he can withhold it from them if he desires. The point of the parable is merely to show that the immediate cause which one sees is just a tool controlled by a distant, unseen cause. What he's saying is, if you compare it apples to apples, you're right, it doesn't actually point out, because we're talking about in the case of the king, in that example, that every person in between has kind of a little power to kind of change the outcome by a little bit, maybe not as hard or a little, a little more. When it comes to Hashem, and it's used merely as an example, when it comes to Hashem, the outcome is exactly what Hashem wants to do. The Bechira is there for every single person. Even in the case of, in this example of the intermediaries, when it comes to the real life of Hashem, these intermediaries, even if they want to make it harder or less hard, it's still going to be up to Hashem whether that's going to happen regardless, even though it's coming from that king, the Melech Bas of Adam. And so what we learn from this is, and super, super important, we always have to remember something. When we get something that we want, or when we get something that we unfortunately don't want, we have to remember, and this is part of the pitfalls of bitachon, is that we tend to lose it and say, oh, why did this happen? Stuff here, whatever, I give up. we have to remember that the outcome of what just happened, that immediate cause to that effect, they're not to blame. They're the shaliach. That item was the obstacle that Hashem put in the way. The point is that he's trying to make over here in this third specific factor that he's bringing on to avoid these pitfalls is that the cause and effect process has to do with way up high. Hashem is the one who makes that happen. So don't walk around blaming others. Don't walk around blaming things. Don't walk around blaming yourself. Don't walk around blaming your business. Because that's not the reason for the outcome. The reason for the outcome that you receive, good or bad, is because that's what Hashem decreed. At the end of the day, it's what Hashem wants for you is what's going to happen to you. If Hashem wants you to be healthy, you'll be healthy. If he wants to be rich, if he wants to have shidduchim, children, how many children, every single outcome you have is because of Hashem. And vice versa. If Hashem wants someone, unfortunately, to be sick or to have other failures, or whether it be physically, emotionally, financially, children, whatever it is, that is because Hashem decreed so. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and I love you all.